My name is Ruth Ellington. I'm 82 years old. I was born in a quiet little town outside Charleston, South Carolina, where the Spanish moss hangs low and secrets travel slower than church gossip. I raised 3 children, buried 1 husband, and outlived all the people who ever said I was too soft. But nothing could have prepared me for the day I walked into the Bank of Liberty and saw my daughter dressed in all black, pretending I was dead, just to steal what I spent my whole life building. "Mrs. Ellington," the bank manager said, his voice trembling. I stood there in my navy blue sweater, holding my walker steady, my church hat slightly crooked from the wind. "Yes, that's me," I answered. His face turned white. Inside the executive lounge, the room went cold. My daughter, Denise, was seated comfortably beside a suited attorney, tears dried neatly on her cheeks. She had told them I passed away 2 weeks earlier. Cancer, she claimed. She submitted a forged death certificate, planned a fake memorial out of state, and requested full transfer of my estate. Until I showed up alive. Denise dropped the pen. The attorney looked like he'd seen a ghost. The bank manager backed out slowly, whispering something into his walkie-talkie. The silence screamed louder than words. Then I looked my daughter in the eye and said, "Denise, I hope whatever you were about to sign was worth losing your soul." She didn't speak. Couldn't. Not while security was being called, and the truth began to peel itself open like old wallpaper. But you're probably wondering how we got here. How does a mother end up walking into her own funeral arrangement? Let me tell you. It started with something as innocent as a casserole. It was 3 months before that cold bank morning. I was living peacefully in the small bungalow I'd bought with the insurance money after my husband passed. My knees weren't what they used to be, but I still tended my roses and baked for the church ladies every Sunday. Denise, my only surviving daughter, had recently started visiting more often. She would bring flowers, cook me dinner, and insist I didn't lift a finger. First I thought she was just being kind. But then came the suggestions. "Mom, you shouldn't be living alone at your age. Let me help with your finances. Why don't I handle your will? It's just easier." Each time my stomach turned a little. Denise hadn't been around for most of her adult life. Not when I needed help after my hip surgery. Not when the water heater exploded. She was always too busy. But now she was hovering. Too close too often. I chalked it up to guilt. Maybe she was trying to make amends. So when she offered to help me clear out the attic, I said yes. I watched her carry out boxes I hadn't opened in years. I even laughed when she showed up in a jumpsuit and mask like she was entering a biohazard zone. But I didn't laugh when I found my file cabinet open later that night. My documents, the deed to the house, life insurance, bank info, all slightly rearranged. Had I just forgotten? Or was Denise snooping? I told myself I was imagining things. Until the calls started. "Hi, this is Riverbrook Retirement Community. We received an inquiry about availability and your medical records. Ma'am, just confirming your appointment with Dr. Leverton for a final stage palliative consult. Hello, this is Fidelity Investments. Your death benefit policy has been activated." I was stunned. What death benefit? What palliative consult? I hadn't spoken to any retirement home. Called Denise. "Mom, you sound confused," she said. "Do you need me to come over?" Confused. That word stung more than I expected. Hung up. The next morning, I drove to my lawyer's office with shaking hands. Mr. Whitaker, bless his heart, was shocked. We began combing through everything. My accounts were untouched so far. But the real estate documents. Someone had requested duplicate title deeds and a copy of my signature. Could be nothing, he said. Or it could be the start of something terrible. I didn't sleep that night. The very next day, a fire inspection notice arrived. They claimed I was in violation of safety codes and might need to vacate. Except I never requested an inspection. Then my landline was disconnected. My mailbox was suddenly filled with hospice brochures. That's when I knew I was being erased. I didn't confront Denise. Not yet. I wanted to see how far she'd go. And oh, she went far. 1 week later, I died. Least on paper. I woke up to a delivery man dropping off flowers with a condolence card addressed to my daughter. The obituary was published in a small online paper in Ohio, where Denise claimed I was living at the time of death. Name. My birth date. My life summarized in 4 paragraphs. With no funeral details, because they were private. That was the final straw. I got dressed. I gathered my ID, birth certificate, and bank statements. And I headed for the Bank of Liberty, because I had a hunch that Denise wasn't just faking my death for fun. She wanted everything. And she thought I was too weak, too old, or too trusting to stop her. But I showed up first, right before the ink dried. Right before she could disappear with the last breath of my legacy. What happened next inside that bank changed everything. And that's exactly what I'm going to tell you in the next chapter. But first, let me ask you, what would you do if your own child signed your death certificate before you ever took your last breath? If this story has shocked you already, just wait until the next chapter. Like, comment, and subscribe to hear what happened when I faced the bank, the law, and my daughter, face to face. I wish I could say Denise broke down crying the moment she saw me walk into that bank. That the sight of her living, breathing mother shocked her into remorse. But no. What I saw in her eyes wasn't guilt. It was fear. Not the kind that comes from hurting someone you love, but the kind that comes when your plan is unraveling in public. The bank manager, a thin man with a nervous twitch named Mr. Harrow, was already on the phone with his supervisor. The attorney beside Denise stood frozen with a pen still in his hand. And Denise, she finally spoke. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice too steady. "What am I doing here?" I echoed, raising an eyebrow. That's a mighty strange question for a daughter whose mother just walked in alive, when she's supposed to be dead, wouldn't you say? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The silence did the talking. Denise tried to keep her composure. There must be some mistake. This woman isn't well. That's when I pulled out my ID. Then my utility bill. Then the notarized affidavit from my lawyer stating I was alive and of sound mind. I laid them out on the table, one by one, like playing cards in a poker game I knew I would win. Mr. Harrow looked pale. "We need to pause this transaction immediately," he stammered. The lawyer, who clearly had no idea he was part of a fraud, turned to Denise and asked, "Is this a joke? You told me your mother had passed." "She did," Denise shouted, her face flushing red. "That's not her. She's a fraud." Oh, how the tables turned. Security came in next. Not with guns or sirens, but with presence. Denise stood up so quickly, her chair nearly fell over. I stayed seated. I let them ask her the questions. I watched her squirm. But what hurt most wasn't the lie. It was how easily she looked me in the eye and denied I was her mother. It was like I was watching a stranger wear my daughter's skin. The bank asked me to return later that day for an official statement, and I agreed. But as I walked out, I turned back to Denise and said, "Whatever hole you dug to bury me in, make sure you leave room for your conscience." She didn't respond. She just looked away. Now let me take you back. Because this didn't start at the bank. Started years ago. With a birthday cake. Denise was always ambitious. As a child, she was top of her class. She had her sights set on big cities, big titles, big money. I used to joke that she didn't cry unless it got her what she wanted. I was proud, of course. She got a scholarship to Columbia. Graduated with honors. Married a businessman named Marcus who always looked like he was 2 minutes late to a stock meeting. But somewhere along the line, pride turned into distance. Calls became brief. Holidays became excuses. And eventually she stopped visiting at all, until my husband, Alfred, passed. That funeral was the first time I'd seen Denise in over 3 years. She cried, oh how she cried. But her hands trembled not from grief, but from rage when she asked why the house was only in my name. She didn't even wait a week before asking about Alfred's savings, or his pension. I told her I had everything handled and that Alfred had left me the house and his accounts. She smiled. But her eyes didn't. I should have known then. Months later, my friend from church, Linda May, told me she'd overheard Denise talking to a financial advisor in a cafe. Something about redirecting funds and inherited real estate. I brushed it off. Maybe Denise was helping someone else. But then I received that letter from the Social Security office requesting verification of my death status. Yes, you heard me. The government thought I was dead. That's when I called Mr. Whitaker. He advised me to set a trap. We filed a notice of intent to transfer my estate, knowing Denise would catch wind. We left breadcrumbs in the financial system. Small movements in the investment accounts, a call to the insurance company, a property reevaluation. And just like we expected, Denise made her move. She forged the death certificate using an old copy from my hospital records, signed a fraudulent affidavit stating I'd passed in Ohio, and filed for inheritance claim on all my assets. But what she didn't know was that I was watching the whole time. That day at the bank was supposed to be her payday. She planned it down to the minute. Even wore black to make it look believable. She didn't count on one thing: me showing up first. I returned to the bank later that afternoon and gave a full statement. The fraud department was notified. The police were informed. And just like that, Denise was no longer just a grieving daughter. She was a suspect. But things were only beginning. Because while I may have stopped her at the bank, I still didn't know how deep she had gone. Had she taken loans in my name? Had she altered my will? Were there other people helping her? That night I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table, hands clasped around a cup of tea gone cold, wondering, why would my own daughter wish me dead? Was it money? Was it resentment? Or was it something I'd missed long, long ago? And then came the knock. Firm, heavy knock on the front door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I reached for the bat I kept near the hallway and tiptoed forward, heart pounding in my chest. When I opened the door, what I saw on my porch made my knees buckle, not from fear, but from a truth I never wanted to believe. 'Cause it wasn't Denise. It was Marcus, her husband. And he was holding a box full of my documents, whispering, "Mrs. Ellington, I think we need to talk. Before it's too late. If you thought this chapter shook you, wait until you find out what Marcus reveals about Denise's plan in the next chapter. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you believe justice always finds its way. You won't believe what's coming next." Marcus didn't wait to be invited in. He stepped inside my house like he was escaping a burning building. His eyes were wild, shirt wrinkled, and the box in his arms thudded onto my living room table like it was packed with explosives. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Ellington," he said, breathless. "I didn't know how bad it was until today." I didn't answer. I just sat down slowly, staring at him, the way a woman does when she realizes the monster doesn't always live under the bed. It sometimes shares your last name. He pulled out files, printouts, bank statements, copies of my will, copies of my signature on documents I'd never seen in my life, forged powers of attorney, real estate transfer requests, even a fake hospice discharge form. And then he handed me a sealed envelope. "I found this in Denise's nightstand," he said. "She never thought I'd look. But I heard her on the phone, talking about getting everything finalized before Mom shows up again. I thought she was being dramatic, like she always is, but today," his voice cracked, "she said you were gone." That word sat heavy on my chest. Like I was nothing more than a pawn to be wiped off the board. I opened the envelope. Inside were detailed notes, plans. Denise had outlined a timeline. Mom's passing in April, it read. Claim filed by mid-May. Liquidate by June. Move assets into Cayman account. Reinvest through Marcus's contacts. She even had notes about selling my wedding ring. I looked up at Marcus. "And you didn't know about any of this?" His eyes met mine, red with shame. "I swear, I thought she was just helping you get organized. I didn't know she was faking your death. I didn't know she was trying to erase you, Mrs. Ellington. God help me. I married a woman I don't even recognize anymore." The betrayal sliced through me again, fresh and raw. But somewhere beneath the pain, a deeper question bubbled to the surface. What kind of daughter plots her mother's death? Not with a weapon, but with a pen and a printer. The kind that's been planning it for years. I sifted through the documents Marcus brought, trying to steady my trembling hands. And then I saw it. A signed copy of my will. Except I never signed that version. In this copy, Denise was listed as the sole beneficiary. My son Henry, God rest his soul, had been removed. My granddaughter Chloe, who visited me every weekend, was nowhere in it. The charities I supported. And my signature, forged perfectly. But the date. It was the same weekend I was in the hospital with pneumonia, hooked up to IVs and barely conscious. I remember now. Denise had come by that Saturday. Brought me soup, smiled sweetly. Told the nurses she'd watch over me for a few hours. That's when she must have taken the pen from my bedside drawer and copied every loop of my name. I felt the blood drain from my face. She was waiting for me to die, I whispered. Marcus nodded. I don't know if it started with greed or anger, he said, but it ended with her looking me in the eye this morning and saying, she's better off gone. I sat there for what felt like a full minute before standing up. Help me get my lawyer on the phone. We called Mr. Whitaker. Told him everything. He advised us to bring every document straight to his office the next morning. He also suggested I file an immediate legal freeze on all estate assets and notify the county court about the forged documents. But Marcus wasn't done. There's one more thing, he said. She tried to open a life insurance claim on a policy worth $750,000. My head snapped toward him. That policy lapsed 5 years ago. Not according to the paperwork she filed. I couldn't breathe. Denise had dug deep. So deep she was trying to profit from my actual death, not just claim what was mine in life. She had contacted old insurance firms and requested reinstatement on lapsed policies under the guise of me being terminal. Some company had actually reopened one after she submitted forged medical reports. She found a doctor to sign off, Marcus said. A fake one. Or someone who was paid off. The picture was becoming horrifyingly clear. This wasn't desperation. This was premeditated identity erasure. My own child had tried to kill me, on paper. And if I hadn't shown up at that bank first, she might have tried it in real life. We decided not to call the police yet. Mr. Whitaker said it was smarter to let Denise dig herself deeper while we built a solid case. But we couldn't let her get wind of what we knew. Not yet. Marcus agreed to play along. He would return home, pretend to be angry with me, pretend to demand Denise hurry the process. Meanwhile, I would start securing my accounts, contacting the hospital for records, and preparing to reclaim my narrative. But the hardest part wasn't the paperwork. It was calling Chloe, my sweet granddaughter, and telling her what her mother had done. "Grandma," she answered on the third ring, chipper as always. "Hi, baby," I said, trying to keep my voice from cracking. "Can you come over tomorrow? We need to talk." She arrived the next morning with a bag of muffins and a smile, but the moment I handed her the fake will and Denise's notes, her face turned pale. "Mom did this." I nodded slowly. Chloe broke into sobs. She clutched my hand. "She said you were getting senile. That you didn't want visitors." I held her tight. "She wanted me gone." "But why?" Chloe whispered. That was the question no one could answer. Until Chloe remembered something. She had me mail a package a few weeks ago. Said it was to her lawyer. But when I checked the return address, it wasn't a firm. It was a P.O. box in another county. We stared at each other. "What was in the package?" asked. Chloe hesitated. "I don't know. But it was heavy." That night I called Marcus. He picked up instantly. "Meet me tomorrow," I said. "We're driving to that post office." And we did. At 11:03 a.m., we walked into the office and asked about the P.O. box registered under Denise's name. The clerk narrowed his eyes. "You're the second person to ask about that this week," he muttered. I stiffened. "Who was the first?" The clerk hesitated, then leaned forward and said, Some man, mid-40s, said he was with the state. But something felt off. What did he take? Marcus asked. Didn't take anything. Just left a message in the box. Envelope. No return info. Can we see it? The clerk scratched his chin. Not unless you're her. Or unless you have a court order. I swallowed hard. Because if that envelope was what I thought it was, it meant we weren't the only ones watching Denise. Someone else was. But were they friend? Or were they predator? And what message had they left behind? If this chapter shook you, you haven't even scratched the surface. In the next chapter, we find out what was in the P.O. box and who else is tracking Denise's lies. Like, comment, and subscribe if you believe the truth always rises, no matter how deep it's buried. This story is only just beginning. We left the post office with more questions than answers. Who was the man who came before us? What message had he left in the P.O. box? And more terrifying, was Denise now part of something bigger than just family betrayal? We couldn't let her know we were sniffing around, not yet. Mr. Whitaker advised that if someone else, someone shady, was onto Denise too, we needed to document everything before it disappeared. By the time we got back to my home, I was exhausted. My bones ached from the emotional weight, not just age. Marcus offered to make tea, but I asked for something stronger. My late husband Alfred's old bourbon. Just a sip. I needed to feel fire in my chest to stay awake, to stay ready. That night I sat on my bed, documents spread across the duvet. I traced every signature, every fake form, trying to piece it all together. The dates, the forged visits to doctors I'd never seen, the false address she used in Ohio where I'd supposedly died. It was all part of one long, calculated con. And then my landline rang. It hadn't rung in 2 days. I answered cautiously. Hello. There was a pause. Then a voice. Well, steady, confident. Mrs. Ellington, I suggest you stop digging. For your own good. Froze. Who is this? You don't need to know who I am, the man replied. Just know that Denise owes people. Dangerous people. And they don't like complications. The line went dead. I sat there, phone in hand, the dial tone humming in my ear. Denise owed who? Was this bigger than money? Bigger than inheritance? Was she in debt to criminals? Called Marcus immediately. He didn't answer. Called again. No answer. I felt that old panic rise in my throat. Was he in danger now too? The next morning, just as the sun broke the edge of the window, Marcus showed up at my doorstep. Face pale, shirt stained with coffee, eyes wide. I followed Denise last night. I stepped aside and let him in. She didn't go home, he continued. She went to a warehouse on the east side. 2 men were waiting. They looked military. Or worse. I stared at him. What did she say? She handed one of them a package. Then they handed her a briefcase. I couldn't hear everything, but she said something like, I'll have the rest by Thursday. He sat down and ran his hands through his hair. I think she used your accounts, your properties, your identity, to pay off people she borrowed money from. That explained the urgency. She wasn't just stealing from me, she was buying time. And now we had a bigger problem. If Denise had tied my estate to a criminal network, any move we made could put us both in danger. Mr. Whitaker called just then. He had a development. Ruth, I've contacted the State Fraud Division, he said. They're very interested. Especially because the signature she used to sell your lake property was notarized by a suspended notary. That wasn't all. Denise had opened 3 new credit lines in my name. Bought furniture. Paid for flights. And worst of all, she tried to sell my house, this house. It was listed online under a fake company with a shell contact. She wants to run, Marcus said. She's planning to disappear. But she doesn't know, I replied slowly, that I already locked the deed last week. She can't sell what's already protected. Mr. Whitaker had moved fast, filing emergency protections through the court under elder fraud. But even with that, if Denise tried to push the sale and we didn't act fast, It could trigger a chain of events with people we couldn't control. We needed more. We needed evidence. We needed a confession. That night I did something that terrified me. Called Denise. She picked up like nothing happened. "Mother," she said cheerfully, like I hadn't walked into her crime scene 3 days ago. "Feeling better, I hope." "I'd like to see you," I said. "Just talk." There was a pause. Then, of course. We met the next day at a small cafe by the marina. Chloe insisted on sitting nearby with a wire in her purse, connected to Marcus's phone on record. Mr. Whitaker gave us instructions. Don't accuse, just ask. Let her reveal it. Denise arrived in a blue coat, large sunglasses, and too much perfume. She looked like she belonged in a spy movie, not at a family reunion. "Mom," she said, giving me air kisses. "You look surprisingly well." "I'm alive," I replied calmly. "No thanks to you." She sipped her coffee. "Now let's not start with drama." I leaned forward. "Denise, why did you fake my death?" She laughed. "Fake? What are you talking about?" "I have the documents," I said softly. "I've seen the will, the policies, the forged deeds." Her hand twitched. "I didn't want to hurt you," she whispered, suddenly dropping the act. Mom, I was drowning." "In what?" "Debt," she hissed. "Marcus doesn't know. I borrowed from the wrong people. I tried everything. I even sold my engagement ring. But it wasn't enough. And you were just sitting on everything." Blinked. "Everything I earned." "You don't need it," she snapped. "You live alone, you don't travel, you barely leave the house. What's the point of it all if it just rots with you?" Those words pierced me deeper than any forged signature ever could. "I'm not dead, Denise," I said. "And you were never entitled to my life. You have no idea what I've been through," she spat. "And you have no idea what's about to come," I said calmly. She leaned back, smirking. "What? You going to press charges? You think anyone will believe an old woman over me?" That's when I stood. And Chloe did too. And so did Marcus. And the detective who had been watching from 2 tables down. Denise's face crumbled. The cafe went quiet as the officer walked over and placed a gentle but firm hand on her shoulder. "Denise Ellington, you are under investigation for fraud, identity theft, and elder exploitation. We advise you to remain silent." He gasped. "You set me up." "No," I said, stepping forward. "You did that all by yourself." As they took her away, she turned one last time to look at me. And for the first time in all this horror, I saw the little girl I used to raise. Scared. Too proud to ask for help. But this wasn't the time for pity. This was the time for justice. Because my name is Ruth Ellington. And I'm not done yet. The battle isn't over. In the next chapter, we uncover the full extent of the criminal web Denise got tangled in, and the dangerous consequences Ruth must now face for exposing it. Like, comment, and subscribe if you believe the truth is worth fighting for. You won't believe what comes next. I should have felt triumphant watching Denise be led away in handcuffs. Instead, I felt a heaviness that even the law couldn't lift. Because when your own child tries to erase you, not from anger but from entitlement, you don't win. You survive. That night, I sat on my porch in the same wicker chair I'd rocked Chloe in as a baby. The cicadas hummed like always. The stars blinked like nothing had changed. But everything had. I wasn't afraid anymore. But I wasn't safe either. Because just as I poured myself a cup of warm tea, the porch light flickered, then died. It hadn't rained. The skies were clear. My fuse box had never failed. Something was wrong. I stood slowly and reached for the flashlight by the door. And that's when I saw it. An envelope taped to my front door, with no postage or return address. In red ink it read, "She was supposed to pay. Now you will." I didn't scream. Couldn't. My fingers trembled as I peeled it off and opened it. Inside was a photo of me, taken earlier that day. The cafe. From across the street. I stumbled back, heart pounding, ears ringing. Whoever Denise owed They were now coming for me. I called Marcus, voice barely steady. He drove over within minutes, flashlight in one hand, pepper spray in the other. Chloe arrived next, clutching her phone, already dialing Mr. Whitaker. Within an hour, we had filed a police report. But the officer who took our statement, a young man named Garrett, looked grim. "Ma'am, I'm not gonna lie to you," he said. "This isn't just fraud anymore. These are threats. And if your daughter's dealings go as deep as we think, you may be dealing with a group that doesn't play fair." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "Her financials show contact with an entity we've had our eye on. Offshore laundering, crypto funnels, maybe even human assets. We believe she used your name to secure collateral for illegal trading." My knees gave way. Marcus caught me before I hit the floor. I'd thought the worst had passed, but Denise had opened a door to a world I didn't understand. And she had dragged me in with her name games and greedy schemes. Officer Garrett continued. "We're assigning a patrol to circle your block every few hours. But I suggest you stay with someone for a few nights." I refused to leave my home. Not now. Not ever. Instead, I had Chloe stay over. Marcus installed motion sensors and a security cam in the front yard. And Mr. Whitaker, he got busy. Because the trial was coming. And if Denise pleaded guilty, she'd likely flip, reveal everything about who she owed, what she did, and how far it all went. But if she didn't, I could still be in danger. Days passed in tension. Chloe refused to leave my side. My phone rang hourly with updates. Lawyers, detectives, bankers, journalists. Everyone wanted a piece of the story. The miracle widow who exposed her own daughter's inheritance scheme. But I didn't care about the headlines. I cared about surviving the fallout. One afternoon, while Marcus and I were reviewing the fraud report, I noticed something odd in the bank printouts. An account in my name, opened 2 months ago in the Cayman Islands. Under it, there were 2 smaller connected accounts. "Those aren't mine," I whispered. "Let me check," Marcus said, typing rapidly on his laptop. A minute later, his eyes widened. "Those aren't hers either." "What do you mean?" "I mean, Denise didn't open these." My pulse skipped. "Then who did?" He leaned in closer. "These accounts trace back to a company registered in Delaware. Shell company. No owner. But the email listed is not Denise's. It's someone named Joseph Grant." "Does that name mean anything to you?" he asked. I shook my head. But something stirred in the back of my mind. That name. That surname. Then it hit me. Grant was my late husband Alfred's business partner. The one he'd cut ties with back in the 80s. The one he said did things with money that stank like rot. I remembered Alfred's exact words the night they argued. "If you keep funneling that cash through fake companies, Joe, I'll take the fall with you. And I'm not going to jail for your greed." After that, Alfred never spoke to him again. I thought he'd vanished. But maybe not. Maybe Joseph Grant had found a new pawn in my daughter. I called Whitaker immediately. "Check into Joseph Grant. Look at any properties, accounts, or offshore dealings connected to that name or his aliases." "On it," he said. The next day, Whitaker called me back. His voice cold and deliberate. "Ruth, we may have a bigger problem. Joseph Grant is under federal investigation for running financial scams using elderly identities. We believe Denise may have been manipulated by him. Or worse, was working with him from the start." I sat still, trying to breathe. My daughter wasn't just a thief. She may have been recruited. That's when the doorbell rang again. This time, it was a man in a suit, flanked by 2 plainclothes agents. "Mrs. Ellington," he said. "I'm Agent Conway with the Department of Justice. We need your cooperation in a federal probe." I opened the door wider. "I've been waiting for you," I said. Inside, they laid out a story so twisted it made my stomach turn. Joseph Grant had been targeting elderly individuals with clean credit, unencumbered assets, and minimal tech literacy. He used middlemen to get close to their families, forge documents, and reroute funds into shell companies. Denise, they suspected, had become his willing puppet. She may have been lured in, Agent Conway said. Or maybe she volunteered. Either way, she's in over her head, and so are you now. They wanted me to testify. Not just against Denise, but against Grant himself. I agreed. Because I was done being a victim. I would be the witness who took down the man who used my daughter, and nearly destroyed my life. But that night, as I got ready for bed, I saw something outside my window. Man. Standing at the edge of the property. Watching. He didn't move. Didn't flinch. Just stood there like a warning. Then, slowly, he lifted his hand and drew a single finger across his throat before disappearing into the woods. My hands trembled as I locked every door and every window. Because this wasn't over. Trial was weeks away. And the people Denise had gotten involved with, they were still out there. In the next chapter, Ruth prepares for trial and faces her most dangerous test yet, keeping herself and Chloe alive while federal agents close in on the criminal empire her daughter entangled them in. Like, comment, and subscribe if you believe justice doesn't age. You won't believe how close the danger gets next. The man in the woods haunted my sleep that night. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps. Every rustle outside made me hold my breath. Kept the lights on. Kept the security system armed. And slept in a chair by the window with a flashlight in one hand and Alfred's old shotgun in the other. Just in case. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a target. By morning my body ached, but I had no intention of breaking. Not now. Not after surviving betrayal, lies, and a fake death. I brewed a pot of strong coffee and called Agent Conway. There was a man on my property last night, I told him. He didn't say a word, just stood there. Watched me. Agent Conway's voice was tight. We're dispatching a team to monitor your house full-time. If this is what we think it is, they're trying to intimidate you out of testifying. Then they picked the wrong grandma, I said. Let them try. Still, they weren't taking chances. That afternoon, 3 unmarked cars rolled up and parked at the corners of my block. They rotated agents in 12-hour shifts. Chloe was assigned protection too. Marcus, now a key witness, was advised not to travel alone. This thing was growing bigger than any of us imagined. And Denise. She was still in custody, silent. Not a word to her lawyer. Not a word to the press. She refused to speak to me or Marcus. She's scared, Agent Conway said. She knows what she got into. I wanted to believe that. But a part of me still wondered if Denise chose this path, or if she was too deep before she ever saw the fall coming. Meanwhile, Mr. Whitaker and his team were preparing my official testimony. They wanted every detail. How Denise re-entered my life, what she said, when the documents changed, the names I saw, the voices I heard, the threats I received. They called it a narrative statement. Called it my truth. As I recounted it all, my hospital stay, the fake obituary, the forged will, the bank confrontation, I felt my heart slowly lighten. Telling the story didn't make the pain go away, but it gave it a shape, frame. It made it real. It made me powerful again. But just as we neared the final page of my written statement, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived. Delivered by hand. No return address. The envelope was thick, sealed with red wax, like something from a Gothic novel. I opened it with a knife. Inside was a typed letter on ivory paper. Mrs. Ellington, it began. You are being watched not because you are in danger, but because you are important. Denise's downfall disrupted things. But your silence could still restore balance. If you testify, we cannot protect you. If you walk away, all of this disappears. No one will come for you. No one will touch your granddaughter. You'll live peacefully. You have our word. Think carefully before choosing legacy over safety. There was no signature. No name. Just a small symbol at the bottom. 2 interlocking snakes. Felt sick. This wasn't just about Denise anymore. She'd been playing a much bigger game, with people who didn't play fair. People who negotiated with threats. I brought the letter to Agent Conway immediately. He examined it with latex gloves and photographed every inch. We've seen this symbol before, he muttered. It's tied to a group known as Obsidian Ledger, high-level financial crime syndicate. They move money, not drugs. No tattoos, no street signs. Just paperwork, loopholes, and vanishing victims. And they're threatening me. They're giving you a choice, he said grimly. Speak and risk it all. Or walk away quietly. I looked him dead in the eye. I buried a husband, raised children, survived cancer, and pulled myself out of a betrayal that would have broken anyone else. I'm not walking away. He nodded slowly. Then we protect you until the end. The next week moved like a storm front. My house turned into a safe house. The press camped out blocks away, desperate for quotes. Chloe was transferred to a safe location. Marcus went dark under federal instruction. And then, 3 days before the pre-trial hearing, I received a phone call. From prison. Ruth Ellington, the automated voice said. You have a collect call from Denise Ellington. Froze. My hand hovered over the receiver. Do you accept the call? The voice repeated. Pressed 1. There was silence. Then static. Then her voice. Mom. I swallowed. I'm here. She exhaled, shaky and small. They're going to kill me, Mom. You don't understand. I didn't mean for any of this to go that far. I just wanted to fix it. The debts. People. Joe told me it would be clean. That you wouldn't even know. That you wouldn't suffer. You signed my death certificate, I said, cold and clear. I thought I'd have time to fix it before it became real, she whispered. That's not how death works, Denise. She started crying. Real tears this time. Or so they sounded. They said you wouldn't suffer. That it would be silent. That it was just paperwork. I didn't think. I couldn't take it anymore. You didn't think because you stopped feeling, I said, my voice rising. You let money rot your heart. You let strangers tell you your own mother was disposable. Please, she whispered. Don't testify. They'll kill me. Pause. Then I said the one thing that had lived inside me since the day I walked into that bank. I already died once, Denise. This time I'll choose who lives. Hung up. When the day of the hearing arrived, the courtroom was packed. Agents, journalists, prosecutors. And there I stood, Ruth Ellington, 82 years old. Blue hat pinned proudly to my curls. Wedding ring still on my finger. I raised my right hand. And I told the truth. About everything. Denise stared at me from behind the glass wall of the defendant's booth. Her eyes bloodshot, her lips trembling. She didn't smile. Didn't scowl. She just listened. And when I was done, the courtroom was silent. Dead silent. But it wasn't over. Because as I walked down the courthouse steps, flanked by officers and Mr. Whitaker, a black car pulled up on the curb. The window rolled down slowly. A man with sharp eyes and a deep scar across his cheek leaned out and said, "You just signed your own ending." Then the car sped off. Agent Conway shoved me back inside the building. Because war had just been declared. And in the next chapter, I would find out what kind of battlefield I had stepped into. If you believe one voice can shake a criminal empire, don't miss what happens next. Like, comment, and subscribe because the fight for truth is just heating up. And this grandma, she's just getting started. They moved me that same night. No goodbyes. No warning. Just a silent escort of 3 black SUVs, 4 federal agents, and 1 packed overnight bag. Chloe wasn't allowed to know where I was being taken. Neither was Marcus. Agent Conway just leaned in as I buckled my seatbelt and said, "Until the trial's over, you're no longer Ruth Ellington. You're a witness under federal protection." They drove me for hours, through backroads, small towns, and wooded highways that blurred into black silence. We finally stopped at a remote lodge tucked in the Blue Ridge Mountains. It looked like an old retreat center turned bunker. Motion detectors lined the perimeter. Surveillance cameras were mounted like sentinels. No phones. No visitors. Just me, a wood stove, and a window that overlooked nothing but trees. I wasn't afraid. I was angry. Angry that I was the one being hidden while the men who built empires out of people's stolen lives walked free. Agent Conway stayed with me. Rotated shifts with a second agent named Langley, a quiet woman with eyes that missed nothing. They cooked meals, briefed me on the upcoming trial, and handed me a burner phone that could only call one number, them. That first night I barely slept. I sat in front of the fireplace rereading the statement I'd given under oath. Every line etched with betrayal. Every paragraph soaked in Denise's greed. But as the flames danced in the hearth, a memory came to me. Not of Denise as a criminal, but as a girl. She was 10, maybe 11, crying because the school bus left without her. I remember sitting her on the counter, drying her tears with the hem of my apron, telling her, "You don't get to control the storm, baby. But you get to choose what kind of ship you'll sail through it in." Now she had chosen to burn the ship, and take me with her. The next morning, Agent Langley woke me at dawn with a folder in hand. "Ma'am," she said, "you need to see this." Inside was a series of photos, grainy but clear. Men at a gas station, one of whom was Joseph Grant. The scar-faced man who threatened me at the courthouse was also there. They were seen speaking to someone wearing a maintenance uniform and entering a vehicle registered to a cleaning company in downtown Charleston. "We believe they're using legitimate businesses as covers," Langley explained. "They're not hiding anymore. They're circling." "Have they tried to approach Chloe?" Ask heart-skipping. "We've moved her to a secure facility. She's fine. But there's more." She slid another sheet forward. Printout of a bank transfer. $200,000. From an untraceable account to a bounty broker in Mexico. I looked at her. She nodded grimly. "They've put a price on your head." The room spun. "I should have stayed quiet," I whispered. "No," Langley said firmly. "You should have stayed alive. And that's exactly what we're going to make sure of." I wasn't allowed outside after that. Not even onto the porch. The windows were sealed, draped, monitored. Meals were prepped in vacuum-sealed packs. My entire life was reduced to whispers behind locked doors. But in that silence, something stirred. Resolve. If I couldn't speak loudly, I would speak wisely. If they tried to erase me in life the way Denise tried to on paper, then I would make sure my truth was too big to vanish. That night I recorded a message. On the burner phone's camera. "My name is Ruth Ellington," I began, staring into the lens with every wrinkle, every scar, every ounce of dignity showing. "I am 82 years old. My daughter faked my death. Tried to steal everything I built. And the people she worked with want me gone for good." Paused, then leaned in. "But I'm still here. And if anything happens to me, if I disappear, if I'm found, if I fall and they call it an accident, this video better be played at the trial. The church. The press briefing. You hear me? Let the world know I didn't go quietly. I told the truth. And I fought back. I sent it to Agent Conway. And Chloe. And Mr. Whitaker. Just in case. 2 days later a breakthrough came. Denise cracked. In a plea deal session with federal prosecutors, she confessed everything. How Joseph Grant had approached her with an opportunity after she fell into debt. How he promised to clear her credit if she could secure access to a clean inheritance. How she'd supplied my documents, faked the hospice reports, filed death paperwork in a quiet Ohio county where no one would verify. And how she was promised 10% of all the laundered funds once everything cleared. But it got worse. She admitted that Joseph was planning to clean up the trail, including me. She'd heard them on a call talking about cutting off the loose end. Me. Her mother, Denise, had cried during the confession. Begged the agents to protect me. Begged them to reduce her sentence. But by then, it was too late to hide behind regret. Agent Conway brought me the transcript and looked me in the eye. "She gave you up to save herself. But now she's trying to save you to feel better about it." I nodded slowly. "Will they arrest Joseph Grant?" "We're getting close. We have the locations. The shell companies. We just need one more piece." "What?" "Proof of payout. That Denise received compensation. That connects the money trail." I sat back in the chair, heart pounding. Then it hit me. The briefcase. The day Marcus followed her to that warehouse, she left with a briefcase. She never deposited the money. She didn't spend it. But maybe she stored it. I called Marcus. Check your attic, I told him. Check the crawl space. Check everywhere. 3 hours later he called me, whispering like he'd found buried treasure. It's here, he said. Behind a loose panel in the bedroom closet. A briefcase full of cash, receipts, a ledger book, and a flash drive. He sent photos to Agent Conway. By nightfall a federal team was on the move. Joseph Grant was about to be exposed. But I didn't feel safe yet. Because that evening, as I looked out the window of the safe house, I saw something in the distance. Flicker. Red light. Like the tip of a cigarette. Blinking. Butching. They hadn't given up. They were still coming. And in the next chapter, they arrive. If you've stayed with me this far, you need to know what happens next. Like, comment, and subscribe. Because what's coming in the next chapter is not just justice. It's war. The storm hit at 2:12 a.m. Not a natural one. Not thunder or wind or rain. But the sound of shattering glass on the west side of the safe house. The side with the kitchen window. The side no one ever approached. I was jarred awake by the shrill scream of the motion alarm. Red lights flashed. A voice boomed through the safe house intercom. Security breach. Stay in position. Do not move. I grabbed my robe, slipped on my house shoes, and crouched behind the love seat in the den. Agent Langley burst in, gun drawn, voice razor-sharp. Stay low, Mrs. Ellington. They're here. My breath caught. The ones Denise worked for. The ones she tried to escape with the truth. The ones who wanted me gone. Gunfire cracked from the east perimeter. Shouting. The sound of tires screeching. Agent Conway's voice barked through the radio. 2 hostiles breaching back entry. Repeat. 2 hostiles breaching. I clutched the burner phone. My fingers trembled as I typed the message. They found us. Then I hit send to Marcus, to Chloe, to Mr. Whitaker. Langley knelt beside me, voice tight. They're not here for money. They're here to silence. I looked her dead in the eye. Then they came to the wrong mountain. Minutes felt like hours. My ears rang with every shot. But the agents held the line. These weren't local cops. They were federal strike-trained. No. I wasn't about to be a sitting duck. I reached under the couch and pulled out the old revolver they'd let me keep, unloaded but symbolic. Langley glanced down and smiled grimly. Loaded or not, that's the most grandma thing I've ever seen. You better believe it, I whispered. Suddenly, silence. No gunfire. No movement. Just breath. And then Conway's voice, calmer this time. Clear. We've got them. 2 in custody. 1 on the run into the woods. Langley helped me up. They caught them. She nodded. Ooh. 3rd won't get far. Thermals already locked on him. Exhaled. I wanted to cry. But I didn't. Instead, I sat on the floor, pulled my knees to my chest, and let the reality hit me. They tried to kill me. Not in a courtroom. Not with threats. But in person. Like a target. Like prey. By morning, the safe house had turned into a mobile command unit. Tactical teams combed the woods. Dogs were brought in. Surveillance drones deployed. And within hours they got the 3rd man. But that wasn't the victory. The victory came at 7:42 a.m., when Agent Conway walked into the living room with a USB stick in hand, freshly pulled from the pocket of one of the attackers. It's the ledger, he said. Everything. Transfers. Code words. And Ruth, your name is on it. As an inactive account. They were going to use your estate to launder millions. I leaned back, stunned. They hadn't just targeted me once. They were planning to use my death for years to fund crimes across the globe. Joseph Grant hadn't just manipulated my daughter. He built a system to erase people like me. Quiet elders, invisible widows, soft-spoken retirees. And turn our legacies into currency. But no more. The next day, federal agents stormed 4 locations simultaneously. 2 warehouses, a corporate office front in Delaware, and a high-end condo in Miami. Joseph Grant was arrested without resistance. He didn't fight. He didn't run. He just smiled. Like he expected it. Like he had a backup plan. He was flown to Washington in shackles, placed under federal lockup, denied bail due to risk of flight. And just like that, the web began to unravel. Dozens of shell companies collapsed overnight. Millions in assets frozen. International partners exposed. And Denise. She was offered a reduced sentence in exchange for full cooperation and testimony. She took it. She wrote me a letter from jail. Not asking for forgiveness. Just saying she was sorry. That she loved me. That she was scared. That she didn't know how to stop once she started. I read it once. Then burned it. Because this story wasn't about closure. It was about consequence. I was released from protective custody 2 weeks later. The trial was over. The danger, at least the physical kind, was behind me. But my life, it would never be the same. Chloe came back to live with me. Marcus visited every weekend. We replanted the rose garden Alfred loved so much. And every Sunday, I wrote in a journal titled, "What They Thought I'd Forget." 'Cause they thought old age meant silence. They thought time dulled memory. They thought a soft-spoken grandma couldn't shatter an empire of lies. But I showed up. To the bank. To the courtroom. To the witness stand. Live. And that, more than any weapon, was what brought them down. One morning, as I sat on the porch watching the sunrise, Chloe brought me a package. It was from Mr. Whitaker. Inside was a sealed envelope. And a check. $1.2 million. Government restitution for damages, identity theft, frozen assets, and legal costs. At the bottom was a note. "You didn't just survive, Ruth. You won." Smiled. Because I hadn't just reclaimed my life. I'd rewritten its ending. But don't think for 1 second that justice ends here. Because in the next chapter, something unexpected returns. And not everyone is happy about the outcome. If this story stirred something in you, please like, comment, and subscribe. This fight may be over, but the legacy is just beginning. Winning doesn't mean peace. You'd think after surviving fraud, betrayal, and a near-death attack in the woods, I'd be able to rest. But peace has a strange way of skipping over people like me. People who've seen too much, lost too much, and dared to stand up when others bowed. The world moved on after Joseph Grant's arrest. Headlines faded. The court transcripts were filed away. Denise's trial was over. Her reduced sentence sealed. 5 years with possibility of parole in 3. Everyone told me I should be relieved. But I wasn't. Because something didn't sit right. A week after the dust settled, Mr. Whitaker called me in for what he said would be a simple document review. Just formalities. I brought Chloe with me. We'd started doing everything together since the safe house incident. I wasn't letting her out of my sight again. When we arrived, Mr. Whitaker's office was unusually quiet. Too quiet. He closed the door gently, then sat down across from me. "Ruth," he said, "we've discovered something odd." My stomach clenched. I reviewed the final seizure records from Grant's assets. There's a discrepancy. One account, tied to your name, was never closed. In fact, funds were moved into it 2 days after Grant's arrest. What? I blinked. That's not possible. The government froze everything. Yes, he said. They did. But someone else moved this. From another account. Not in Grant's name. Not in Denise's. From someone we haven't identified yet. I looked at him. How much? $250,000. The room felt like it tilted. Mr. Whitaker leaned forward. This isn't hush money. Babe. Someone wants access to you again, Ruth. I shook my head slowly. No. This is over. We ended it. Then explain this. He slid a single photo across the desk. It was a still from a surveillance camera outside my house. Taken just 3 nights ago. The photo showed a man standing on the sidewalk. Baseball cap. Leather jacket. Head down. But I knew that walk. That frame. those shoulders. It was Alfred, my husband, the man I buried 12 years ago. I gasped and covered my mouth. No, I whispered. That's not, he died. I saw him in the casket. I buried him. Mr. Whitaker said nothing. I turned to Chloe. Her face was pale. Grandma, what does this mean? She asked softly. It meant everything I thought I understood was wrong. The next day, Conway returned to Charleston and sat with me in the same kitchen where my life first fell apart. We believe the man in that photo is not Alfred, he said gently, but someone connected to him, possibly from his past business dealings. The man's face was never fully caught, but his walk, his habits, they match Alfred's military file. I stared at him. Alfred never had a military file. Conway looked away. He did. Classified records. He worked with a federal contractor in the 80s. Covert logistics, offshore funds. It was buried after his death because the investigation had closed. But Grant was once a contractor too. That's how they knew each other. I leaned back in my chair. My hands were shaking. Everything I believed about my late husband, about his simple job, his loyalty, his life with me, it was unraveling. He was clean, I whispered. He was an honest man. I believe he was, Conway said. But honest men get used. And Grant may have used Alfred to set this whole operation in motion decades ago. What are you telling me? I asked, barely able to get the words out. I'm saying, the attack at the safe house wasn't just about silencing you. He paused. They were looking for something Alfred left behind. Chloe sat beside me wide-eyed. What kind of something? A ledger. Or a drive. Something that shows the first deals. Something that predates the crimes. Something only Alfred could have hidden. I didn't know what to say. Until I remembered something strange. Back in 2009, a year before Alfred died, he spent weeks fixing the old upright piano in our garage. Said it was for therapy. I thought it was just age getting to him. But he never let anyone touch it. Not me. Not Denise. No one. After he died, I left it alone. I stood up suddenly. I need to go home. Ruth, Conway warned. You're still under partial protection. I need to go home, I said again. Now. They sent 2 agents to escort me. Chloe rode beside me, silent, both of us lost in thought. When we arrived, I didn't even take off my shoes. I walked straight to the garage, brushed away the cobwebs, and opened the piano bench. Nothing. Then I reached under. Felt something taped beneath. Steel box. My hands trembled as I pulled it out. Inside, a single key. Photograph. Bank slip. The photo was of Alfred, standing outside a storage facility in Georgia. The key had the same facility's name engraved. Pine Bluff Units, B22. The bank slip. A deposit of $5 million. Dated 1987. Untraceable. No account name. Just a code. I turned to Conway, who had followed me in. This is what they want. He nodded wide-eyed. Then we need to move. Now. We flew to Georgia that same night, armed with warrants and a protective team. Unit B22 had dust on the handle, but the lock turned easily. Inside were boxes, old boxes, labeled with initials, AE and JG. And beneath them a locked safe. When we opened it, we found what nobody had expected. Original documents. A founding ledger for a secret fund. Names of people still active today. Politicians, corporate moguls, former military. And on the last page, signature. Alfred Ellington. My husband. Next to Joseph Grant's. And a third name. Elijah Grant. Joseph's son. Still active. Still free. Still running the next phase of the operation. And he was the one who moved the $250,000 into my account. He wasn't done. He was just starting. In the next chapter, the final chapter, Ruth confronts the last ghost of her past and delivers justice that echoes through generations. Don't miss the powerful ending to this unbelievable journey. Like, comment, and subscribe if you've been with Grandma Ruth since Chapter 1. The storm is about to end, with thunder. We had unearthed a ghost. But he wasn't dead. Elijah Grant, son of Joseph. The hidden hand behind the next generation of the crime empire. The one who slipped through while his father took the fall. The one bold enough to send money into my account after a federal case. The one who stood outside my house in a baseball cap and leather jacket, leaving just enough trace for me to feel watched, but not enough for the system to react. Till now. When we opened that steel box in Unit B22, we found everything the government had failed to trace in 30 years. Offshore documents, black ledgers, project codes from decommissioned military funds, all initiated under a secret name that tied Joseph and Alfred together. Elijah Grant. And the last page. Letter. Handwritten. Dated June 1991. If anything happens to me, protect Ruth. She doesn't know. She can't. But tell her the moment Elijah comes looking. The truth must be told. It was signed. Al. My knees gave way. Agent Conway caught me, gently guiding me to a chair in the back of the storage unit. He knew, I whispered. All these years, Alfred knew this would come back. Conway nodded. He tried to shield you. But Elijah was patient, quiet. The son Joseph never risked. The one still holding strings. I clutched the letter. My husband's words in my hands. He'd spent years laying a trail, not for Denise, not for himself, but for me. To finish what he couldn't. To break the chain for good. The duo scrambled when they saw the documents. The CIA requested partial review. Treasury agents flew in. And at the center of it all, widow, with a letter, and a name they all feared. Elijah Grant. Do you want to testify again? Conway asked me days later. I looked him dead in the eye. No. I want to confront him. He hesitated. That's dangerous. I've lived with danger since I buried Alfred, I said. I didn't know it then. But I know it now. And I'm not afraid of the dark anymore. Conway paused, then sighed. All right. But you won't go alone. A meeting was arranged, off the record. Not on paper. Not public. It took place in a federal black site, deep beneath a courthouse in Virginia. Elijah Grant had been picked up 2 nights prior during an accidental traffic stop, on a highway outside Atlanta. He hadn't resisted. He smirked. Now he sat behind bulletproof glass, cuffed to a steel table. Clean-shaven. Polite. But in his eyes, ice. When I walked in, he tilted his head. Mrs. Ellington, he said smoothly. A pleasure at last. Sep. No fear. No wavering. Your father tried to kill me, I said. My father was a businessman, he replied. And you were a threat to his returns. Your father turned my daughter into a pawn. No, he smiled. She came to us. Desperate. We don't force loyalty. We reward it. I wanted to scream. But I didn't. Instead I pulled out the letter. Held it against the glass. Alfred left this for me. Told me to watch for you. Told me you'd try to finish what your father started. Elijah leaned forward. And what do you plan to do with all that information, Ruth? Destroy the rest of my legacy. I looked him in the eye. No, I said. I plan to bury it, with you inside. The trial was expedited. National attention resurfaced. Widow of fake dead fraud case exposes multibillion-dollar laundering scheme hidden since the Cold War. The media went mad. Whistleblower protections were extended to me and Chloe. Marcus testified too. Denise, from prison, gave a full video statement confirming Elijah's involvement. And 3 months later, in a high-security courtroom packed with agents, journalists, and quiet enemies, I stood once again, testifying not just for myself, but for Alfred, for the others who had no voice. Elijah was sentenced to life without parole. And I was free. For real this time. Months passed. Chloe graduated college and started working at a non-profit that supports victims of elder abuse and financial fraud. She called it Grandma's House. Marcus finally moved out of his temporary apartment and bought a small home just 2 streets over from mine. He brings dinner every Thursday. Roast chicken, cornbread, sometimes pie. The garden bloomed again. And on a bright spring morning, I sat on my porch holding the final check. $3.5 million. The full restitution, plus compensation for damages, pain, and the estate that was nearly erased. But I didn't cash it. Not right away. Because I knew what to do with it. I started the Ruth Ellington Foundation, an organization built to protect elderly individuals from fraud, legal manipulation, and silent abuse. We fund attorneys. We offer education. We even run a national alert system when suspicious activity is reported by caretakers or family members. 'Cause my story, it's not rare. It's just rarely survived. And now, every time someone tries to write off a mother, a grandmother, a quiet widow in a rocking chair, they remember me. The woman they tried to kill on paper. The woman who showed up alive. And brought it all crashing down. If this story moved you, if you stood with Ruth from the first chapter to the last, let us know in the comments. Share this story with someone you love. And never underestimate the strength of a grandmother who refuses to be forgotten. Because justice doesn't have an age. And silence was never part of her legacy.